Good evening and welcome to AFL Insider. Glad you could join us.
On Friday night and watched your game, Rocket. Defensively, the Pies just looked all at sea. There was a couple of easy goals kicked. Certainly the McKernan goal was one that I just thought just happened too easy for some reason. You see this quite a bit in the modern game, I know, but the Crows just seem to pick you apart a few times through the middle of the ground. You just see
it was amazing the number of times we saw them get 2 and 3 players running forward of the ball in space like we have here through the middle of the ground. And something obviously broke down from a Collingwood perspective, didn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I think you can tell that obviously our zone at times, but I think Adelaide really used their pace to get through it. And I think the best way to see that last goal is if we go from behind the goals and show some vision, that it was a point kick in. And I've just highlighted that they've set their players up out wide. You know, they had 2 players out there as forwards. You know, we got a scrimmage. It was a quick kick from Collingwood. I think Buckley kick. There's a mistake here. We dropped a chest mark. We've got Dangerfield has left the contest with speed. Riley's followed up his kick. His quick hands out to Dangerfield now. Changes pace, and there's one of those players that started outside, which is poor pleasure. Then it's over the back. So obviously our zone situation there, be able to put some pressure on the ball carrier. But I think the main thing is that there's different methods to beat the press. I think Adelaide have shown that they want to run, they want to change speed, and Dangerfield's very much a key to that. Hawthorn, Bulldogs, Essendon, short kicks through the zone. Other teams want to kick long, I suppose, example, Melbourne.
So where'd you really break down in that zone setup? I mean, we saw a couple of mistakes, but was it sound? I think
when you've got young players, you talk about a defence situation, and we had Tarrant, Tuvey, Shaw, they're all missing. There was read-off for the last quarter. So at times, some of the young players get in the wrong position. They may be following a player when they shouldn't. In that situation, they tend to try and do the right thing and follow their player, follow their opponent, but you need to hand over and you need to keep your structure up.
It's interesting you had a look at the Crows, Jace, and just had a look at how they went in their forward 50. I think that one's easy, the one over the top. Most players can get back into space. You can have any player on that last line charging back, but just their actual targets, if you like. There's a forward line that has Walker and Tippett as 2 genuine key targets, and Paul Pleasure as a smaller half-forward flanker type. We see him there being the target for that entry, and the 2 bigger guys in Walker and Tippett back for the crumb. It just looks like it's the wrong way around at times. I know you can be caught in that situation.
I reckon that's by design. I reckon they thought, he's getting hold of Nick Maxwell, let's push him deep and see if we can utilise that one-on-one matchup. And they actually exploited it pretty well, I thought, because it's not easy to create one-on-one opportunities all the time for wherever you see the mismatch being. But they had the discipline, McKernan, Tippett and Walker, the other big blokes, to actually pull up. Yeah. And you're right, it looks funny when you see a little bloke flying and big bloke scrumming it, but it can be effective.
Yeah, it can. I think Paul Pleasure, as we mentioned, is maybe 6 foot, but he can play as a 6'4" player because he's got a good leap, he's got a great pair of hands, he's very hard to get the ball forward from, and they've got a very dangerous forward line.
Well, just have a look at the numbers from the weekend, the entries as to the targets. You can just see that Paul Pleasure was the target quite a bit, 8 times. Lynch has given 7 of those goals out of those 8 occasions against Maxwell. Tippett and Walker there combined for 10. So there is a little bit of firepower there that they can certainly use and mix it up. We've seen Dangerfield play at full forward before. We've seen Knights down deep. So they've got a bit of firepower again about them, the Adelaide Crows.
That's for sure. And they've got some marking targets. Now there's Douglas who's missing at the moment, who didn't play. So Vince plays there, Dangerfield as well. So they've got some, I think, got a good balance. I think too, you want to be critical of the defenders, if that's the right phrase, and we had 3 or 4 out, but I think our pressure through the midfield too needed to be better as well.
Good thing is when those goals get kicked over the top, it's the poor old defender that doesn't get back in time that the fans over the fence are hooking into. When it's actually someone further afield that's torched him, isn't it?
Sure, that's right. And I think it might be a situation too, if you have the press, it might be your opponent, but you're the closest one, you have to sort of cover for it.
Dangerfield, the crowd get excited and wind up. He's off with 1. He's got 3 Crows to go to. He could have taken his pick.
Have a look at this bloke. Doesn't he look exciting, exhilarating? And he could well, within 12 months, be just one of those blokes you're just desperate to go and watch in the mould of Jardin and Adelaide.
It's very hard to argue with Brownlow medalist Gerard Healy. Paddy Dangerfield could be an absolute superstar in the AFL competition. In 2007, he was the number 10 pick in the draft. We've seen what he can do in the forward 50. He's powerful on the lead and can take a great contested mark. What we've only seen in bits and pieces is his midfield work. Once again, extremely powerful with a contested ball and the ability to blow teams open. That's where we need to see him if the Adelaide Crows are going to impact the top 8 in 2012. Dangerfield needs a big pre-season and an injury-free season as a midfielder.
Well, I think we all thought Patrick Dangerfield was going to be a great player, but he's now starting to deliver on a week-to-week basis. Rocket, it's been interesting watching the development of Dangerfield at Adelaide because we felt he was a midfield type, but they were very loath to put him in there for long bursts.
Yeah, I think you have players like that at stages. It takes a while to build the tank up, and I think he was such a dynamic player as a junior that he probably didn't rely on his aerobic ability. And I think to play in the midfield with an AFL level, you've got to have a great tank. And I think he's slowly but surely been eased in there, and I think we've seen over the summer now that he's really, I think, about to grab that spot.
When you were coaching at Sydney and the Bulldogs, did you have players that you needed to hold back out of the midfield, even though you probably thought that's where they'll end up?
Now, I suppose the obvious one is Sean Higgins from the Bulldogs. That we saw him as a midfielder, but I think it was the case, one, through injuries, but B, as far as building his tank up. An interesting one at Sydney was Mick O'Loughlin, who's probably been renowned as a forward, but after about 3 or 4 seasons, Mick was after me about playing in the midfield, so I said he had to build his tank up, which he worked really hard. In his first game there, he kicked 5 and had 35 possessions. So then, unfortunately for Mick, he got his knee injury, but they're 2 good examples.
Well, I don't think it'd be a surprise if Paddy Dangerfield starts recording those sort of figures. I think David King's going to take the discussion a step further.
Thanks, Jace. Just having a look at the absolute midfield, the clearance players, the contested ball winners of the Crows here. Last year it was Scotty Thompson or bust in the midfield. We've just got the reliance graphic here, if you like, of the clearances of 2011. You can just see Scotty Thompson, 17% last year. If he didn't get it, no one did. Dangerfield was pretty solid with 11. He's come up. Sloane's the big one. 16% this year through the NAB Cup period. Less reliance on Scotty Thompson, who we know will be a key contributor as the year gets going, but that now becomes a group of midfielders who can win their own ball and get the game going in Adelaide's half, if you like. So it's not just Scotty Thompson or bust anymore.
No, absolutely, Kingy. I mean, very impressive midfield they're starting to get together, there's no doubt about that. Not only with their clearance work, but their ability to carry the ball through the lines. And we saw probably on the weekend, and we've spoken already tonight, about the ability to get through the zone, get the goals over the back. And certainly the Adelaide Crows are doing that. And we just see here, you need good rebound, you need to really play on forward of the contest. And that's what the Adelaide Crows have been able to do. From a defensive point of view, from the Collingwood's point of view, they need to hold up play. And that cross that line, not allow the Adelaide Crows players to play on. Now, it does a reasonable job here, but it plays on, hits a good pass, I think, to Jacobs on the wing. Again, you need to hold him up. I think that's Lockie Keith on the mark. Wasn't able to. They were able to play on forward of the contest again, hit up another target. Obviously, there's no one there, and now the quick ball movement goes forward, and it's an easy goal over the back to Port Pleasure. We see again from behind the view, and the lack of ability to stop the Adelaide Crows from that position was the key, because then it just opened things up. And on the left of screen, we see up and top, that's where the Adelaide Crows players are by themselves in the forward 50. Also just below those arrows, the Collingwood zone slow to get across, so there's a big void centre wing there, which makes the Collingwood defenders vulnerable. So they're tending to push forward a little bit, but at the same time they've got to defend over the back. So they were, as I think we talked about one of those instances earlier, you had young defenders, so they didn't know whether to go forward to pick up a man or stay back in their zone position.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Adelaide, we've obviously tracked them a couple of weeks before we played them, that their play on from a mark and free kick is astronomical. They just get the ball going as quick as possible. There's one goal that Van Berlo kicked. He marked it inside 50 and he went to play on because that was his instinct. We closed him up and they called play on and he kicked a goal around the body, which he didn't mean to do, obviously, as far as that. No, that's not his first option, but they just want to play on as quick as possible and get into the forward line as quick as possible.
And that's something that has differed from last year. They seem more structured and prepared to kick down the line last year, but certainly to turn the ball inboard and try to get the goal over the back is something they've really concentrated on.
Yeah, and I think they're kicking more. I think last year they handballed a lot, especially in the back half, and they come through centre-half back with their run and handball, and they still handball a little bit, but they're kicking, and they've got good kicking skills, but the fact they're prepared to play on actually keeps the zone active and moving and doesn't let you set up.
We had the discussion earlier, Rock, and I wanted to ask you the question. We were talking about, have defenders become too reliant on the zone and the press? Do we do enough training in one-on-one contests of defenders these days, or do we just kind of take for granted that when they need to, they'll be able to halve a contest?
I think it's a good point. I think clubs, what I hear back, are going back to more contested work at training. I think with the press and the zone, it's more about having a +1 so that he supports he supports his mates and comes over the top. I think teams with the movement of the ball, unless you move it slowly, it's going to be more one-on-one. They're going to have to mind an opponent a bit more often. So there's going to be an interesting that defenders will need to have to defend.
Well, let's have a look at one more little bit of vision from the Crows game and the Pies on the weekend, and just see how vulnerable again the press can be to quick ball movement. Now there's a contest here, good defensive spoil, but a good crumbing position for the Adelaide Crows. This is the real problem here. Swanee really needed to stick this tackle. We know most of the time he does that, but the fact Dangerfield pushed through the tackle, broke the tackle and ran into space, he was able to bridge the gap and carry the back defensive line, and there Taylor Walker was then set up for an easy goal again. Once again we see from behind the goals vision, and we'll see how it pans out. Now the dangerous spot obviously in the forward 50, we see Taylor Walker there. The dangerous position is behind him. In front, there's congestion, so Dangerfield needs to carry the ball. Ideally speaking, if there was a free kick, he'd be kicking down the line, but he needs to get the ball to that shaded area, which is the dangerous position. Because of the broken tackle, he was able to do that. Now, that's, as we said, that's not going to happen that often, that you're going to break the tackle of someone, especially as good as Dane Swan, but on that occasion, he was able to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's the speed and the dynamic nature of Dangerfield. There's not many players. Griffin can do that. Yeah. Daniel Wells can do that, where you just split it. And I think Swanee was probably surprised that he had so much power and speed. Yeah. He was able to get away from him, and then you can see the look on Swanee's face. Oh, shivers! I've got to get you, but he's gone.